Insecure attachment. As stated by Seigelman, Ryder, and D. George Walker in 2016, the original theorist of the attachment theory was psychiatrist John Bowlby, but elaborated on by his colleague Mary Ainsworth, who was a developmental psychologist. As defined by Bowlby, attachment is used as a strong connection between two people. Its effect is that if one is feeling emotionally distressed or insecure, then just being in the presence of the intimate companion can achieve a sense of contentedness. Ainsworth's contribution delved deeper into the infant-parent relationship and what the variable was triggering a change in behaviour. Ainsworth characterised these diversities into 4 types based on the quality of each attachment. The first attachment was secure attachment. In 2001, Howe states that approximately 60 to 65% of 1-year-olds in Western society and 50% in many other studied societies were affected. Infants securely attached to mothers or caregivers. Infants are securely attached to mothers or caregivers. Hazan, Camper, and Kuryash described securely attached infants in 2006 as confident and comfortable to explore a room by themselves as long as their parent are in the proximity to make them feel secure. Although upset when the parent leaves, they're more than happy to greet them warmly and excited to be back in their presence. When the parents are around, the securely attached are comfortable even around a stranger. Resistant attachment. Again, according to Seigelman, Ryder, and D. George Walker in 2016, around 10% of 1-year-olds are affected by this type. This type of insecure attachment caused by reactions of anxiety or mixed feelings, so is also known as anxious ambivalent attachment. Resistantly attached infants will absolutely not go off to play while their parent is nearby, unlike the securely attached. Stronger separation anxiety is present when the parent leaves, but upon return, the infant turns having a variety of feelings aimed towards the parent, seemingly resenting them to leave, yet still remains close to them. These infants that represent resistant attachment try the hardest in every way possible by bonding with a parent or showing anger and hurt, to get affection and security. However, they are never satisfied. Insecure avoidant attachment. Seigelman, Wright, and D. George Walker stated in 2016 that this type of attachment affects 15% of 1-year-olds. This type of infants do not go off to adventure very often and show little emotional distress as the parent leaves and tend to avoid them and contact upon return. They're not necessarily tense around strangers, yet just tend to stay away from them, like how avoidant attachment infants ignore their parents. It appears that these infants put space between them and their parents, suggesting that they have no need for affection or are just ignorant to how to express their emotions and needs. The 4th type is disorganized, disorientated attachment. Seigelman, Ryan, and D. George Walker in 2016 also state that after realizing that some infants do not fit into any type of the previous 3 attachments, Ainsworth added disorganized, disoriented attachment. This type affects 15% of infants, but more so in high-risk families. In 2014, Jennings and Shamings linked this type of attachment to emotional problems that continue later in life. Infants in this category may act distant and unusual. They can also initially go for contact only to reject their parents as they approach, then to pursue contact for the second time. Consistency is lacking in this type, hence the label of the attachment. Regulation is also lacking, resulting in being stuck within approaching and avoiding their parent, as well as not knowing whether they are frightening or not, due to having no strategy of dealing with negative emotions, for example, separation anxiety. The contrast between secure attachment versus insecure attachment is evidenced in the following case study.
A series of studies recorded in the video titled Measuring Attachment Strange Situation is a prime example of the various types of attachments proposed within attachment theory. The study observed multiple children and their reaction to a scenario in which they are left alone in a room without their parent. The procedure involved a parent and their child seated in a room with the child stimulated by a set of toys. A stranger then enters the room, interacting with the parent. After 3 minutes, the parent is to leave the room and the reaction of the child being left alone with the stranger is recorded. Observing how the child interacts without their parent present can help determine the child's type of attachment. After 3 more minutes, the parent is then let back into the room in order to comfort the child if needed. This process is then repeated, except the following time the child is left alone in the room without a stranger. This is done in order to determine if the child's response to their parent leaving is affected by an external variable. The following clips are examples of the types of attachment styles that that were observed during the study. Oops. This is an example of secure attachment. When the child realizes that the parent is gone, they start to cry as they are comforted by the security of their parent. The child was also comfortable around the stranger when the parent was near, which is another sign of a securely attached child. This second video shows an example of insecure attachment being displayed by a separate participant. The child in this video displayed little to no emotional distress as their parent left the room, while also not showing interest in the stranger when they were present, which are both signs of an insecurely attachment style. This study supports the ideas of attachment theory suggested by Ainsworth on the varying levels of attachment children display towards their parents and under what categories these variations fall into.
Psychiatrist John Bowlby maintained that the quality of the early parent-infant attachment has lasting impacts on development, especially on later relationships. Infants construct internal working models, also called cognitive representations of themselves and other people, that guide social information and behavior in relationships. Securely attached infants will form these internal working models, suggesting that they are lovable and trusting of other people to care for them. By contrast, insecurely attached infants may conclude that they are difficult to love and that other people are unreliable. They would be expected to have difficulty in close relationships later in life. Furthermore, Bowlby and his colleague Mary Ainsworth found that securely attached infants are more able to initiate play activities, are more sensitive to the needs of others, and are socially competent. They also have higher IQs and better school performance than less securely attached infants. In summary, Bowlby and Ainsworth's claim has been well supported that the quality of infant attachment styles do influence later development. A little bit about social deprivation in infants. What happens to infants who never have a chance to form an attachment? In the first 6 months, deprived infants showed signs of poor growth, medical problems, brain abnormalities, delays in physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development. This was stated in the Leiden Conference on the Development and Care of Children in 2012. They recovered rapidly once they were adopted by loving, responsive caregivers, but some had long-term problems. High proportions of children in deprived institutions showed disorganized attachment to their favorite caregivers in institutions, and then abnormal patterns of attachment with their adoptive parents. Some were diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder called reactive attachment disorder, who displayed emotionally withdrawn behavior. Others displayed disinhibited attachment, involving indiscriminate friendliness, lack of normal wariness of strangers, and an inability to endure give-and-take relations. I'll give you some examples of secure and insecure attachments. At Romanian and Russian orphanages, where children were neglected by caregivers, visitors often discovered that the children had not developed attachments to their caregivers. They were withdrawn and engaged in constant rocking. The late adopted children were found to have many more serious problems. For example, being depressed, withdrawn, attention-seeking, and had problems controlling their temper. Neuroscientists suggest that these are the results of developmental brain dysfunction or damage brought about by a lack of touch and body movement in infancy, and by the absence of early play, conversation, and other normal childhood experiences. Another example is of military families. Long-term separation of young children from a parent is an issue for military families when a family member is deployed to a war zone, as in the Iraqi and Afghanistan wars. Although most families cope well, some infants and children develop emotional and behavioral problems. Programs specifically designed for military families can help reduce the negative effects of deployment on all concerned. More on later development. In a revealing longitudinal study of 78 individuals, Jeffrey Simpson and his colleagues in 2007, as claimed in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that there were links to securely attached infants and the quality of peer relationships in primary school, through adolescence, and then in romantic relationships in adulthood. Further longitudinal research shows that overall, infants who have had routine care by someone other than their parents were not much different than those who were exclusively cared for by their parents in many aspects of development. On average, the importance of responsive, caring parenting in creating a secure attachment is one of the best established findings in developmental science.
To most, insecure attachment in infants doesn't seem to be an issue, and most parents would define their insecurely attached child as just an easy kid. However, gone unnoticed, insecure attachment styles can have long-term effects on mental health and cognitions. Attachment styles usually become observable for about 8 months onwards, meaning that the first months of infancy become the most crucial times for children to experience sensitivity and care and to build on the basic needs of survival with human contact and interaction. The style of parenting that is adopted through these months determines the attachment that the child will develop. Usually, if insensitive, avoidant, or neglectful parenting is present, some form of insecure attachment will result. It is important to address any insecure attachment, as studies have shown that attachment styles that display avoidant or dependent behavior can carry long-term implications into adolescence, such as increased levels of depression or anxiety. The National Scientific Council on the Development of the Child states that severe cases of neglect can even inhibit structural and functional development, including that of stress response systems which we use to cope with adversity. An article from 1995 called Breaking the Intergenerational Cycle of Insecure Attachment suggests that insecure attachment can be attributed to a cycle of parenting and is not necessarily a reflection of the competence of parents. It states that when a mother displays insensitive or avoidant parenting, it's usually due to her own personal models of attachment that have been developed from her own childhood. This then goes on to create the same models of attachment in a child who will then grow up to parent their child in the same way, and the cycle will continue. Therapy's limitations. There are many models of therapies and much debate on which ones are the most effective when it comes to combating insecure attachment. Some promote focusing on the parent-child relationship to provide a more sensitive and responsive relationship, while others suggest that engaging the parent in their own therapy at earlier stages opens up their own ideas of attachment, and this acts as a better preventative to break the cycle of insecure attachment. A study conducted in 1990 observed the development of attachment in infants when influenced by either being carried in a soft carrier against the mother's body or in a regular plastic child seat over the course of a whole year. The results revealed significantly more cases of secure attachment in those that had been exposed to constant physical contact than those that were carried in seats, which suggests an effective method of preventing insecure attachment during infancy. On the other hand, there are studies that focus on developing healthy relationships and support systems for the parent to try and promote healthy attachment models before the infant is even born. The particular study worked with pregnant women with low social support and introduced them to a mental health model which entailed building a supportive environment through weekly home visits. While this study delivered no results within infant security, maternal sensitivity levels were significantly higher, meaning that the mother was interacting and responding more with their infant, leaving less room for insecure attachment to develop. In critically analysing the literature, we discovered that the downfalls of their strategies could include any experimental errors, that being participant dropout and human error. Otherwise, Beckwith's study may have had issues with parents post-intervention, in that parents may have become dependent on the supportive relationship and lacked the skills to uphold a positive relationship on their own. There is also the issue of ethics. Studies that address issues such as neglect, attachment, and development all come with limitations in terms of ethics, especially those which work with infants and children. For example, studies are not allowed to experiment on things such as the effects of neglect, malnourishment, or abuse for obvious reasons. In practicality, methods similar to these, such as therapies for pregnant parents and attachment promotion in infants, allow for more positive attachment models in parents and a positive parent-child relationship. This means that the transition into social situations such as daycare or playgroups and institutions such as schooling becomes an easier and more positive experience for both child and parent. At-home therapy for pregnant women may also help with postnatal depression, which again promotes sensitivity and responsivity in the parent. Not only that, but there are positive long-term implications in terms of mental health and important cognitive functions and structure